And welcome to everyone joining us for the Rise and Thrive Virtual Youth Summit, proudly presented by the YMCA of San Diego, Windward Academy, the San Diego Padres, the Carol Kimmelman Athletic and Academic Campus, and the U.S. Tennis Association Foundation. I'm Justin Lipford, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement for the YMCA's Youth and Family Services. I've had the proud pleasure of working for the YMCA for 7 years, and within this time, I've spent and dedicated my every day in helping young people that are facing homelessness, young people coming out of the foster care system, as well as our overall community get to a place where they're all thriving. In this Let's Overcome fireside chat, I'll be joined by a San Diegan who has an appreciation for overcoming tough obstacles to achieve his own success. We will be putting a link in the chat where you can read more about him. It would be great for you to check that out in case the backgrounds inspire any questions you like to put in the chat for additional Q&A. We couldn't be more excited to welcome Mr. Baker. So I'm going to ask him to please turn his microphone on and his camera.
Absolutely. Hey, Justin.
What's happening, my man? Now, we're calling you Mr. Baker, but you're my buddy. I'm going to call you Dave. Are we good with that?
Yeah, call me Dave.
All right, man. How's your morning going so far?
It's good. It's good. Saturday mornings, I go over to the Spring Valley swap meet and kind of check in with my cultural folks down there. So I'm charged up and I'm ready to chat.
Right on, man. Well, I'm excited as well. I think that as long as we've known each other, and that probably is close to 4 years now. But within that time, I feel like every time we've connected, I've learned more about you as an individual and all the passion that you bring to helping our community. And so I am excited to be able to go through some really great questions, just to be able to provide our community with a little more wisdom and knowledge about what you do. But before we get there, let's start off with something a little light. Let me ask you a couple random questions. First, your favorite musical artist.
Favorite musical artist? I'm gonna go with I don't know if you can hear the trash truck outside. Probably my favorite. I'm going with Drake. I'm a huge Drake fan. I've been a fan of Drake since I don't know 2010. So anything Drake. In fact, the funniest thing is he just released a candle line, and I made the order, so I've got brand new Drake candles sitting on my shelf right here.
Drake candles on the shelf. I love that, man. I know you've always talked about Drake in the past, and I think that's good to hear. All right, so you're here in San Diego. Let me ask you this: what is your favorite spot to grab a burrito?
Oh my goodness. Favorites. I mean, there's so many, right? San Diego, we've got all the goodies. I'm gonna go with probably. Oh man, I gotta go sombreros.
Sombreros.
Good. You know, San Diegan style
Yeah,
has a nice touch to it. Plus, burritos are like the size of my forearm, so get a good.
definitely.
Well, I gotta ask you because you're a burrito connoisseur yourself. So where are you going?
Well, I'm definitely a fan of the pollo asada burrito from Roberto's, right there right there in the heart of North Park, right off of El Cajon Boulevard. So that's my to go. Although I can't have them too often, man, because as I'm getting older, the cheeks are getting a little more plump, man. So I gotta keep that to a once a month. You know what I mean? So let me ask you this question, man. I think it's important for us to kind of just start with a little context of who you are. So, just so these youngsters can have a deeper understanding of all the passion and magic that you bring. So could you please just give the audience a quick snapshot of who you are and, a little bit about your history?
Absolutely. So I guess I'll kind of start this snapshot off with saying I'm a survivor of poverty,
Mm.
right? I come from what's called generational poverty. So that means my grandma struggled with poverty, my mom struggled with poverty, and of course I was born right in the middle of it all. So that's kind of the basis of where I'm from and everything that comes with that. So struggling with housing instability, struggling with food instability, struggling with financial instability, all the instabilities in the world. And by 16 years old, I had a pretty good understanding of how things work around here. So I said, you know what? Let me try my own luck. And I went ahead and dipped out of my household. I was a runaway youth. I think a lot of folks would be familiar with that term.
Mm.
And 16 years old, I'm out in the world just trying to make things happen. Years and years went by before I was able to sort of find my footing in the stability department. But it's what's interesting is when I was about I forget exactly how old I was, but I was just finishing up high school and I found myself out in El Cajon City here in San Diego County. And so I finished off high school there, and once you finish off high school, you're sort of on your own as far as the systems go. So,
Mhm.
here I am, a recent high school graduate. I believe I was 17 and a half, and I'm just trying to make my way in the world, and of course everything that comes with that. So, you're trying to find a place, but it's a weird space when you're 17 and a half emotionally, as far as your place, because you're kind of an adult but you're not adult enough to make your own sort of legal decisions. So that sort of set the tone for my race for resources, and from that point I knew what I needed to get. I knew I needed I needed a place to settle my head, and I needed education, and I needed stable employment, and I knew I needed all these things. But I mean, attaining it was so difficult as a young, man of color. I was susceptible to so many things that come with living in the streets, whether that be, violence or whatever you have to navigate to make it out. And
Survival stuff.
survival stuff, I love that. I had to
Yeah.
do survival stuff.
Yeah.
And for years and years I would kind of bounce here or there doing a little bit of couch surfing,
Mm.
from state to state, between California, New Mexico, and New York. You might see these things behind me. It's got the cities where I kind of landed. um, and it wasn't until I was about 21 years old, right, when I walked through the doors of a program that Justin used to oversee, a transitional living program here in San Diego. And I was on my, I think, let me see, I was about 21, and I had a couple of days until I turned 22. And in the world that we live in, when a young person turns 22, it kind of disqualifies them for a lot of these vital resources. And so, and Justin, the story, but for the crowd, Justin and his team really took a chance on me, because I was pretty much aged out of eligibility for this particular program. And not because anybody, it's funding reasons, it's bureaucracy, right? And so Justin and his team took a chance on me. They gave me access to this amazing program. I mentioned it's called a transitional living program, but for me, it was so much more. I was able to not only transition my state of housing, I was able to transition who I was as a man, and as a leader, and as an entrepreneur, and as a student, and as a son, and and
Yeah.
everything. It gave me a place to kind of start building who I wanted to be. For the first time in my life, I was given this foundation. And since then, I've been right here in the Y, and luckily I've got folks like Justin and other individuals who have kept me well connected to who I want to be, and invested their time and their energy into building me up. And that's kind of that's how I got here.
It's such a magical story, man, and especially when you talk about some of these details, because I think it really demonstrates, what it is to embrace your own resilience. So I want to take one step back. You talked about from the time you graduated, really up until the point that we met through our YMCA program, having housing instability. So, I think sometimes we tend to look at that from like a general community when we think of housing instability, right? Is like just like being homeless and sleeping on the park bench, right? But you mentioned the term couch surfing, and so that makes me wonder, during those 17, 18, 19, 20, those years, what would you say is the longest period of time that you had a place to stay, like a residence? What where you were, you every day you go there, you go home per se, right? What would you say was the longest period of time during those 10 years?
Wow, I think that's a great question. Shoot, I was living out of a suitcase, so it's pretty much however long I could stick around comfortably. So when I say couch surfing, and for the folks out in the crowd, couch surfing is an action where you kind of just get in where you fit in, right? And then so I would settle at a friend's house for a couple of nights, and then once anyone got the slightest hint that I was experiencing housing instability, I'm out of there. I'm like,
Right.
oh, I'm gonna go back home now. Let me go back into my life. And that had a lot to do with shame, and a lot
Mm.
of what comes, the stigma that comes with being homeless. I didn't want to lose my friends. I wanted to be the cool teenager that every teenager wants to be. And so,
Right.
that's to explain a time period where I would be. I'd say as long as my pride would allow me.
Yeah. Yeah,
Transfer.
man.
years.
Yeah, man. No, I can only imagine, man. I mean, again, when I even think about other youngsters that have had the ability to support that have gone through similar things, most would tell me that they've never had a chance to stay in the same place more than 6 months at a time in most of their lives. So, I can only imagine how when you live with that condition, how hard it is, like you were saying, to get to a place where you can pursue college education, pursue getting a job, really pursue the dreams and ambitions that you have. Yet you, and what makes you so magical and what makes me so happy to call you my friend, is you've had the ability to do just that. And I love how you said you got a chance to get some immediate stability through some housing offered by the YMCA. But then also within there, we saw a young man who was extra motivated and understood what it takes to get out of the state of poverty and get onto a path that can promote your own prosperity, right? And we started to see in you just this high level of resilience and this high degree of wanting to give back and help out. So let's dial in a little bit into that. Where was this energy coming from to not only help yourself but help those around you?
That's man, that's a question that I feel like I'm still finding the answer to,
Mm,
right? But I'd say if I could put a pin in one thing, it'd be connection. It'd
mm,
be, we have a saying here at YFS for all the folks in the crowd, and it's connection is protection. And that's what I was given. I was given a connection not only to a whole team of staff. I had a therapist. I had all these great things, but I was also connected to folks like yourself. I don't know if you remember, but speaking of tacos, one day you and I went out and we went to you took me out to lunch, and I'm sweating bullets because I thought I was in trouble. Honestly, I thought my housing was up. I thought I did something wrong, but
right.
we sat down and you asked me all the questions about my dreams and kind of who I was and all these things. And you modeled something for me. You taught me something to you gave me a skill that I was able to then use with those around me. So I would say, what kind of kept me going and what kept me pumping is how in my life I've always received help from individuals who didn't really know me.
Mm,
Even as a small child, it would be a teacher who would kind of you might show up to the first day of school a little bit dingy because
right.
that's poverty, and a teacher would be the one to say, hey, I got an extra pack of pencils so that I didn't have to ask for one, or those sort of things. So I'd say throughout my life I was able to collect these kind of real life examples of what it means to be a good person, and that's kind of where I started, just being a good person and sort of being intentional about making connections. But
Yeah.
real quick, I think it's a good kind of segue into a question I've always wanted to ask you, and it's what made you such a good connector? Like if you could lay down a couple of skills that sort of helped guide you into your role and also connecting, because just for the folks in the crowd, I know so many young men who look at Justin as a role model and as a leader, and he's just a stand-up guy in our community in a way that's sort of unconventional. So I've always been curious, what about your skill set kind of puts you in that position?
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate that those nice words, man. When I got into this line of work 22 years ago, it was somewhat similar of a story. I was 20, uncertain of what I was going to do with my life from a career standpoint, also experiencing some housing instability. Um, but I always just found that the higher calling or the bigger purpose, at the end of the day, is such a simple notion. It's just to be kind and compassionate to everyone around you. And that just always felt right to me. It made my heart feel good. It made my soul feel great. And so I was very fortunate to get into the line of work that we're in now, where I had where it felt like I was given a chance just to be my truest self, my most authentic self, of just being a good person. Um, and as I've kind of grown within this our industry, I've come to find that like my roles have shifted throughout the years, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing. It's just messaging and modeling compassion and kindness. And so when I meet individuals for the first time, I just do my best to be my truest self, my most authentic self, the good and the bad, and find ways to where we can always cross collaborate to do just that, to be great ambassadors of humanity, man. And I love that, and it feels like it just speaks to what my purpose and calling is. And then in the process, we get to meet really cool people. I mean, I got a chance to meet you, and I consider you a friend and family, and for all our colleagues, and so that has always just been the energy I try to put out there. I do find that the more people I talk to, it is hard for some to embrace their most authentic self. For whatever reason, we think there might be a script that we have to follow that says our authentic self is just for after work hours or on the weekend, but then we need to have this business self, right? And I say no. I think it's about being you at all times. Obviously, cultivating a way that allows you to present yourself in a way that people can deem respectful, right? But at the end of the day, it's like following your heart. So that's what I've done, bro. And I think that for you, you've done something that is I'm so proud of, and I'm so amazed by. You're 24 now, right?
26.
You're 26. When'd you turn
20.
26 on me, man? That happened quick. But so even at your young age, you've had an opportunity to come into an organization and do great things and learn from great people, but now being put in a position of leadership where you can flex your own voice and your own opinion. And so can you please talk a little bit about what your current role is?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Also, just major keys about being your authentic self. I think that's something that gets kind of glossed over so often when
Yeah.
we're talking about these career pathways, and we work with a lot of young people who are trying to find their place. So I
Yeah.
think that's something to put in your pocket for the crowd. That's something to put in your pocket and carry because it will get you through. But as far as what I do, I'm a youth systems director. So my entire role is to engage the systems that are meant to serve youth and tackle barriers, make them more accessible. Also, one of my favorite things to do is to build in a feedback loop for young people to sort of provide their experience with the system, if that makes sense. So to provide this valuable feedback so we can create a FUBU system, a for
Mhm.
us, by us system, right? I know that's kind of an old term, but that's really what my whole gig is to bring young people to the table and say, hey, here's what's actually going on. Because in our work, especially in the nonprofit world, we develop these programs. Of course, we have the best intentions, and we develop all of these resources and things, but in the real world, things kind of translate differently. So, I'm in the trenches with the folks who are experiencing the things, and all different types of systems. So we're talking about the justice system, we're talking about the transportation system, the
Mhm.
housing system, all of the systems. I kind of get my hands on, and luckily I've been propelled to a position in my community where I can be a trusted messenger of the youth, and I still, even in my role as a director, I still have access to young people where I can check in, and my leadership has provided me the freedom to sort of really dive into the community, and kind of collect all the things that we're doing wrong, and then
Mhm.
I'm also empowered to come up with the solutions to do things right. So that's kind of how I would describe my role in a nutshell. And another really amazing thing about my role and the why as a whole is we've recently taken the lead on a huge collaborative housing project with other large organizations in our community. So we have built this human network of individuals who are really trying to take it above and beyond. So the housing program that I oversee is called Housing Our Youth, which, I mean, it's pretty clear what we're trying to do here. But we've taken it a step further, and we've built in those other supports to help young people sustain housing once they get it. So we do that employment training, we
Mhm.
do that relational wellness, so the heart is in it. And those are just a few examples of how we're looking at whole humans, and we're kind of transitioning into this world where it's no longer a housing resource over here and an employment resource over there. We've been able to build this ecosystem of all the needs, and we have everyone at the table, and we have youth at the table, and that's just sort of a testament to the value of lived experience, right? Those are
Absolutely.
we brought those people lived experience in, and our community is ready to listen. And I think that's something that's not necessarily rare to San Diego, but I feel like here in San Diego we've created a model that other communities can sort of put the key into. It's a turnkey model where you can develop these feedback loops in this ecosystem, etc. And if folks are more interested in that, please, I'm sure my information will be accessible, but
Yeah.
what I do, build those systems.
So, I appreciate that. And I do want to kind of go back and focus in on something you're talking about, because the ability to bring people to the table, all stakeholders, including those that we're here to support and serve, it is a skill that very few have. The ability to create that trust that you mentioned is something that, to me, is an absolute gem. Let's talk a little bit about that, though. What are some of the characteristics that you put forward in creating those trusting environments where young people who are experiencing deep poverty feel comfortable coming, and two, them feeling like their voice is going to be heard?
Yeah, I think that's so. I mean, there's a million things that we do, right? We kind of take it on a case by case, person by person, but in youth and family services, we have developed an engagement approach that was really designed right alongside young people, and it's called CAVE.
Mm.
And for folks in the crowd, it's an acronym, of course. We're serving up a little acronym soup for lunch here, but it's compassion, awareness, acceptance, validation, and empowerment.
Mm.
And I look at CAVE as sort of my like my fire suit, or kind of my protection, or my utility belt when it comes to engaging young people. And of course, that first C, right, compassion. That's really where I lead from. I
Mm.
put myself in their shoes. So when I'm asking a young person to come and maybe speak to a county supervisor, right, I make sure that that young person is equipped and they're ready, and they're in a place within themselves where they can kind of deliver their best self. And that's really where I start. And then from there, I do a lot of modeling and coaching, and it's similar to, like I had mentioned, that you did for me.
Mm.
I show them what it looks like. I don't just give them the instruction and say, hey, go ahead and shoot that shot. I line up with them, and I'm right next to them the whole time, and we shoot that shot together. And as we all know, the chances of that shot going in is a lot a lot higher
Mm.
than if I just kind of say, "Hey, here's a ball, here's a court, do your thing."
Right.
Um, and so that's what I lead with. I'm right there with them. I even tell young people, I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And sort of that kind of speaks to that compassion, but also speaks to a little bit of that empowerment, which is so crucial, because empowerment is sort of presenting all the options. And for me, all the options are always on the table for young people. Even when I'm having a conversation with them, I let them know, hey, if right now is not the time to talk, let's talk later on. You're not
Yeah.
locked into this. Um, and empowerment also goes as far as some of the other decisions that come with being a young person in poverty. And so combining that compassion and that true empowerment allows me to sort of set the tone for a relationship that's positive even when it's negative, if that makes sense. So it's letting them
Absolutely.
know, hey, you can make a mistake. You can ignore my call. You can, you can go MIA on me. You can do whatever it is that you need to do, and I'm still going to be here, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to drop you off. And I think a lot of our young people, especially those who have kind of grown up in poverty, are used to that. Kind of, hey, I only got one shot at this, and if I mess up, then the opportunity's gone. So just that compassion and empowerment, constantly balancing the two, and of course, validating the experience of young people, saying, "Hey, I know this is probably weird right now, or I know this is probably uncomfortable. I know there's probably some shame that you're feeling," and sort of just leading with that philosophy of engaging them in a way that's going to be beneficial for whatever we're trying to get done, but also for them, as humans. And there's other things that come with that as well. If we're talking about bringing folks to the table and getting that good
Right.
feedback going, there's that the financial portion. So of course, stipends, and that's another thing that comes with lived experiences. I have a glimpse into what that world looks like. I've sort of sat on both sides of the table, so I know how to set the place, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I know how to set the table.
No, man, absolutely, man. And I appreciate you even kind of getting into the skills of building these relationships, because I found that those skills are transferable, not just working with youngsters that are coming up in circles of poverty, but those are skills that we need for encountering all of and navigating all of our life systems, right? From our families, for me as a father, work, whatever it might be. So again, I mean, those are things that I have found that best suits us to always lead with compassion and utilize everything you've talked about. So thank you for that. I think it's also important to note when we think of the context of San Diego that historically, when people view the city of San Diego, they view it from like a bird's eye view of palm trees and beaches and just beautiful people and beautiful times. And San Diego is without a doubt has all of that. Like that's why I'm a San Diego resident, born and raised. But there are also other sides of our city that really does encompass lots of poverty. And so when we think of young people experiencing homelessness, I think it's important to let our audience know that, you know, San Diego tends to rank and is one of the highest cities in our nation of young people that on any given moment of any given day do not have a place to call home. And so because of that, we know that there is a need for the services that we render, but also the way we render it and having people like yourself, Dave, that are leading the charge. So, you know, I think I'd like to shift a little bit now that we kind of, you know, have a little bit of a taste of who you are and what you do. But really, I'd like to gain some insights, man. So we did have a panelist ask a question. A previous panelist had made the note that education is the only way out of poverty. So I'd like to know, is that a position that you would endorse? And if so, what educational path would you recommend for our younger teens?
I think I love talking about higher ed and education as a whole. I would probably say it's not the only path out. Here in San Diego, we have a philosophy, another kind of thing that we help bring to the table, and it's called the three E's,
Mm.
and that's education, employment, and entrepreneurship. And I would say a combination of the three is the path out. I definitely use higher ed to help navigate out of poverty. So I 100% agree that it's a part of it. But sort of looking at going back to that whole human approach, uh, education sometimes isn't necessarily meant for everyone.
Right.
And also education takes on different almost forms, right? So we have vocational training, which I think a lot of people kind of leave that portion out of higher ed, but it's so crucial. And when we say vocational training, that's, training to become a plumber, training to become an electrician, kind of the trade training.
Mm.
But those other two E's are also extremely crucial, that employment. Now, when we think of employment, it doesn't necessarily start when a young person clocks in, right? It starts with that building that resume. It starts with building those soft skills that are going to help them do the job.
Right.
And that almost goes into who a human is. So it's kind of building up a character, building up personality. And then when we talk about the last E, entrepreneurship, that's where we're taking it a step further and we're looking into someone's dreams and their hopes and
Mm.
kind of where they see themselves going. And again, going back to that empowerment piece, entrepreneurship is kind of where you can allow someone to set the stage for themselves. And I mean, you're an entrepreneur yourself, Justin. So going back to our conversation when we were in the taco shop and you sat me down and I think I had missed my rent payment. I didn't pay rent. So you said, "Hey, what's going on with your rent?" And I said, "Listen, I'm investing the money I would pay in rent into my business." And I'm trying to build. At the time, I was building a consumer electronics business. I was, ordering straight from China, bringing them here,
Mhm.
taking them to the swap meet, like I do even still, right? And
Mhm.
and so I was able to have that conversation with you and say, "Yo, if you give me the opportunity to kind of cut off a few $100s on my rent, I'll put that into my business, and then when I transition out of this program, I'll have something that's built, to help sustain me." And you understood that, and you let me do it. So shout out to you for that. And for about a year, I didn't pay rent, and I
Yeah.
was able to build something that today I can look at on my days when I'm feeling down, because as much as we lead with positivity and compassion, everyone has dark days. So you gave me, I was given this opportunity to build something that on my days when I'm feeling beat down, I can look over there and I say, "Oh my goodness, I built that." I built that, and you feel almost that fulfillment that sometimes the world takes out of us. I'm sure a lot of people can identify with.
Definitely.
The world can get tough.
Yeah.
So I'd say a combination of those three: education, employment, and that entrepreneurship, and there's skills that are transferable amongst the three as well. So that's kind of how we look at the pathway out of poverty, and kind of building that in for young people.
That's so insightful, man. It's so insightful. And again, when I think of you, I think of the perfect model for blending all three of those together, those elements. I mean, to always have a zest to learn more, whether it's in a formalized education setting, whether it's from conversations, whether it's from reading, whatever it might be, to always grow the brain, right? But on top of that, even when you talk about being an entrepreneur, My view has always been that being an entrepreneur is a spirit of an individual. It's the ability to see opportunity, to think a few steps ahead of everyone else, to be able to make courageous guesses and courageous moves, and to do all that. And that all wraps and lives within, it can live within our day-to-day job or whatever avenue that we choose to spend our time, right? So you've embodied that, man. And I love hearing it too, because when we lay it on top of those that are living in deep poverty and cyclical poverty, we understand that a lot of these lessons haven't been taught because a lot of the energy within the household, especially from the youngsters' perspective, has been predicated on surviving, on getting just how are we going to figure out a way to pay rent this month, or how are we going to get food on the table this month, or whatever circumstance may come. So, you've really outlined a playbook that I think speaks to who you are and where we need to go as a people and as a community and making our moves forward. You also said something that I want to point out, because though I consider you to be one of the most resilient young people I've met and just humans I've met, and modeling just a great attitude and a great spirit and vigor for life, I also love how authentic you yourself are. And so you mentioned that some days we're just not going to be on. And some days it's just going to be a matter of we're not in a space where we can be that go-getter or that hustler or that person that's just trying to make the most. And it sounds like you're saying, as a little life tip, like maybe just embrace it, like that we can be all up and down. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, I mean, an analogy that I like to use when I'm having these conversations is I think of us walking through life with a backpack on,
Mm.
right? And as we're kind of walking along our journey, we're experiencing things, and let's call those things rocks, right? So we're walking through life, and let's say you're 5 years old, and maybe your parents are fighting, and you see that kind of family dysfunction going on. So let's pick up that rock and let's toss it in our backpack. And then you're 13 years old and you get your heart broken in middle school, right? Something like that. Let's pick up that rock and let's throw it in the back there. And so over time, if we don't necessarily acknowledge that this backpack is getting heavy, then we're just going to keep tossing rocks back in there. And by the time we're 25, 30, 35, that backpack is going to be so heavy, it's going to be holding us down. And we're going to be playing catch up, thinking, how can we clear these rocks out of this backpack? And so that's sort of how I look at, these adverse experiences that come with life. And for some folks, those experiences are extreme, like I had mentioned, a young person witnessing domestic, that's a pretty extreme case. But even for those kind of more lighthearted moments, getting your heart broken in middle school, it doesn't matter the size of the rock, it's still a rock, right?
Yeah.
And I had mentioned cave earlier, and that sort of approach with the compassion, the awareness, the acceptance, the validation, the empowerment. I don't just use that looking out to the world. I do that right here, right here in me,
Yeah.
right? And that's, I extend myself a lot of the same things that I would extend to folks outside. And in this world, I think that's something that kind of takes a back seat when we're constantly trying to do and do and do and do.
Mm.
I'm never afraid, and I extend this to my teams and anyone that I work with. I'm never afraid to take a day off and say, hey, y'all, I need to disconnect. Whether it could be a Wednesday afternoon, and I say, hey, let me disconnect for about 2 hours. I go out to the ocean, I might take a breath of fresh air. I might stop into, go grab a burrito. I might make a phone call to some of my favorite people, but it's just vital to kind of give yourself that break. In this world, I think we're encouraged to just charge forward, and kind of be tough and pick yourself up by your bootstraps. That's something that I've heard a lot in my life, and I take a second to tell people, take time to tie up your boots, and if your boots are tight on your foot, take them off, right? Are your
Right.
loose? Are your boots? What's going on with your boots? And that's sort of how I treat myself. I look at my boots and I say, are these things fitting correctly? And extending that to folks around you, so it's easier to do it when you need it, kind of deal.
Yeah. I mean, again, this picture of compassion towards self and others you paint is an absolute model, man. I mean, can you just imagine if we all navigated the world with that mindset about, again, treating ourselves with the same love and dignity that we want to extend to others, and just moving forward, man. So that's gems, brother, gems. Hey, but let's think outside of the box real quick, because we know that in the line of work that we do and that we're committed to doing and empowering our communities, the work feels endless at times, right? It just feels like, as soon as we get a young person off the streets and into a place where they can live, we get the phone call the next day that there's another 2 young people that are on the streets that need a place to live, right? So at times it can feel like never ending. However, we do know that we are part of a community of great human beings that love to share their resources and love to be a part of the solution and want to be in the community's corner, but maybe they don't have the time or the skill set to do what we do. However, they're always down to support us philanthropically. So, out of curiosity, let's play the pretend game, but let's just say you got a check from a donor, and that check you just said, write the number you want on there. How would you utilize that, man, to make the biggest impact as far as helping our community, helping other youngsters who've gone through similar things as yourself, get onto that path of prosperity?
That's the question. That's the golden question.
All right, man.
So I really love that you mentioned how our work can almost be, never ending. And I hear often in the world that there's a push to end a homelessness or end poverty or end this or that. And I think we've come to a point where we understand that these things may not ever end, but we need to reach what's called a functional zero, which is a way of dealing with these things when they arise. So if we use homelessness as an example, I would build a system where we can respond to a young person experiencing homelessness that night, where they're off the street that night, and we're ensuring that their homelessness is brief, non-recurring, and rare. Right? We don't want young people experiencing homelessness, because if we go back to that backpack and rock conversation,
Right.
homelessness is a boulder, right?
Yeah.
They're tossing that thing back there. So I would create a system where we can respond to these things, even childcare. I would build a system where, we don't have to wait 2 or 3 weeks for a childcare voucher to come through, and then the young person loses the job because they're worried about where their child is going to stay. I would build a system where we can get these things to them much faster.
Right.
And if I had a blank check, I mean, it would cost a pretty penny, no doubt.
Right.
I would utilize the people who are equipped to do the work, and I would just kind of connect them with almost a lot of folks might be familiar with the term flex funds, but flexible monies that they can use in sort of in different spaces. I mean, I'm talking about funds to help young people with car repair, because if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's intersectionality. It's that housing is connected to education, is connected to employment, is connected to relational wellness, So I would create a system where we can address all those different things, and at times it can be a bit nuanced, but ultimately I would tap into those with lived experience to help kind of guide and create that system, make these things let's just knock it out.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I hear you with that, man, right? And so that's my dream as well, too, right? Just to continue to educate the community so that the community is open and excited about sharing their resources, And the way I view this work, and tell me if it sounds like maybe similar to you as well, is when working with our youngsters on the streets and just youngsters experiencing tough situations. Our job in one hand is to literally save lives. We are tasked with getting these kids off the streets as fast as possible, because the streets is known to claim, unfortunately, countless lives of our young people, right? But maybe not on as dramatic. The other side of the spectrum is we're tasked to save the potential of what these young people have the ability to do. I mean, I often wonder, how many of our young people where the streets have claimed them, either their lives or just their essence, right? How many of them could have been positioned with the right resources, the right support, the right amount of love to have been the next great civic leader, to be the next scientist that cures cancer, right? To be the next great humanitarian. Yet we'll never know, because unfortunately, especially like we were saying earlier, here in San Diego, so many of our youngsters are forced to the streets, and the streets tend to claim them in the short term and in the long term. So, the work you do is powerful. And I would say that, as we continue to move forward, we have an audience of young minds and young hearts that are going to be smarter and brighter and better than us, hopefully so, right? And that's what we need. But I can bet that there's some in this audience, that are cut from the same cloth as us and that have just a deep desire to help and to be a part of the community solution. So, I'd ask, if you can, man, what would you tell them if they're in a position where they like, I want to help, I love what you're saying, I want to do that, but I'm not quite sure on how to get into that place to help?
I think that's there's a lot to unpack within that kind of journey. But if I could give anybody a starting point,
Mm,
I would say start right here with yourself, and understanding that anything that you walk into starts right from inside of here, and really focusing on the skills that are needed to help navigate kind of whatever direction that you're going in, but ensuring that you're kind of well prepared. And then and this might be a little out of the box, but
mm,
I'd say once you feel stable and safe right inside here, then life will sort of put you in positions where opportunity will meet preparation,
mm.
and then you'll have the ability, in those times. So if for any young person or anybody, right? Anybody who's looking to get started but may have had a few setbacks or not necessarily sure where, start right here so that when the feet meets the roads,
Mhm.
you can get it rolling. If
I
that
love
makes
that, man. No, absolutely, man. I mean, because that goes back to what we were saying earlier about the importance of being your authentic self and being able to navigate. So where I've had the ability to connect well and work really well with young men, because for me, most young men I come across that in our programs reminded me when I was young, right? We need others to be able to work with young ladies and all segments and all backgrounds, right? We need that. And if you start with yourself, you really have the ability to do, to provide the work. On top of that, I'll probably couple them saying volunteering is a great place to get started now. Reaching out to your local community and just seeing what's going on in your community. So we have a few minutes left. We have a question that just came through, Dave, and I'd like to kind of throw it at you if you don't mind.
absolutely.
Okay, so the question is from Lindsay. I see kids with very impaired families, single parent families, where the parent doesn't provide any support for the child getting out of the poverty cycle. How do you work with such kid?
Oh,
Great question.
that's a powerful, powerful question. So much reality in that question. I Well, for one, I would say when I work with an individual who may come from some kind of negative family dichotomy things going on,
Mhm.
I would encourage them to own their journey. And I'm just sort of speaking from my own lived experience. I had to unplug from my family, and I had to be something that was foreign to my family. Even still, I have some conversations with my cousins, and they'll say, "I don't even know who I'm talking to because maybe I got a little less ebonics in my conversation." I think that might be an antiquated term, so forgive
I
me.
got
But
you.
I encourage them and say, "Hey, um, just because you ran away or just because you're separating, it doesn't mean you don't love your family. It may mean that you love them more, right? It may mean that you're showing a sort of strength that no one in your family history has really shown." And I think that speaks to that connectedness. And another thing I kind of always drop on young people are your family is really who you make them, right?
Mm,
So you may have been born into this particular situation, but you didn't choose that situation. I don't know anybody who chose where they were born. So,
right.
navigating outside of that, it's not your fault. The only thing that you can control is who you are and what you have going on. And unfortunately, at times, there may not always be a nice support network around you, but one thing that you will always have, I promise, will be yourself. And so I always encourage young people, be your own engine. There's going to be times where, you think of yourself as a vehicle kind of driving yourself forward. You might need to get out and change the tires. You might need to get out and check the oil. But if you equip yourself with all the skills to perform that maintenance on your own engine as you're rolling along, you'll be good. And so that's
I
what I
love it,
drop.
man. I appreciate that, man. I mean, again, the wisdom you have that it comes from just again your shared life experience, just your overall essence of who you are. Earlier when you dropped the connection is protection, like all of that really I believe feeds into how we are as an individual, and how we help our community. And we know that so many of the youngsters in our community are coming from these backgrounds, man. And it may not just look like traditional poverty, right? I've worked with countless youngsters that have come from families of opulence and doing well, but the family, for whatever reason, just hasn't quite figured out how to provide that youngster with the support and love that they need. And so, also you talking about our family doesn't necessarily have to be our blood. It could be those that are around us that give us the same amount of respect and encouragement. That's our family. So, with this, Dave, I just want to say thank you so much, man. I mean, I appreciate you again sharing who you are with this group and inspiring the next generation, and your resilience and just your glow and how you illuminate our community is so well received. And we're so grateful for it, man. So thank you for your time. And for the youngsters out there, we wish you nothing but the best. Be yourself at all times. Continue to feed your mind and feed your heart. Our community needs you to be your absolute best. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.